They say that some stories are told to entertain, while others are told as a warning. Today, we open the files on the sea dragon's wrath. Before we step into the shadows, make sure you've joined our circle by subscribing. I remember the first time I truly understood fear. It wasn't the kind that makes your stomach clench before a duel, or the cold dread of a dark forest. No, this was a primal, all-consuming terror that swept through our kingdom like a plague. A terror born on the salt-laced wind, carrying the stench of brine and something far more ancient, far more monstrous. It began subtly, a whisper among fishermen, then a panicked shout, and finally a roar that shook the very foundations of our coastal city, Tianhai. We stood on the battlements, the sun a bruised orange sinking into the churning sea, painting the distant horizon in hues of blood and ash. Below us, the harbour, once a bustling tapestry of sails and masts, was a graveyard of splinters. Fishing junks, once the lifeblood of our people, lay capsized or smashed against the docks, their timbers groaning like dying beasts. The air was thick with the cries of the wounded, the laments of the bereaved, and the acrid smell of burning wood. I remember tasting it, a bitter tang on my tongue that mirrored the despair in my heart. It had been 3 cycles of the moon since the first attack. Each time it came without warning, a colossal shadow rising from the depths, its scales shimmering with an unholy light, its eyes burning like twin suns. The fishermen called it Longwang, the Dragon King, but not in reverence. They spoke its name with a tremor, for this was no benevolent deity. This was a force of pure, unbridled destruction. Its roar was said to shatter stone, its tail could level a watchtower, and its breath, a torrent of scalding steam, could boil the very sea. We had seen its wrath firsthand, time and again. Each assault left behind a trail of devastation that stretched from the jagged coastline inland, a gaping wound on the face of our prosperous kingdom. I stood beside my father, the emperor, his face a mask of weary resolve. His once straight back was now slightly stooped. His hands, usually firm and authoritative, trembled almost imperceptibly as he gripped the stone parapet. He was a man of peace, a scholar emperor who had brought prosperity and learning to Tianhai. But peace was a luxury we could no longer afford. The dragon had changed everything. It had turned our bountiful sea, our source of life, into a watery grave. Our granaries were emptying, our markets silent, and the vibrant laughter that once echoed through the city streets had been replaced by a low, constant murmur of fear. Another one, he rasped, his voice hoarse, another village lost to the waves. I looked at him, my heart aching. Prince Kang, they called me, heir to the jade throne, destined to rule. But what good was a throne when its people were starving and dying, when the very sea turned against us? I was young, barely past my 20th year, and the weight of this responsibility felt like a mountain on my shoulders. I had trained with the finest swordsmen, studied the ancient texts, but none of it prepared me for a foe that defied steel and wisdom alike. Our generals, seasoned veterans with scars from a dozen border skirmishes, were helpless. Their catapults, usually so effective against land-based invaders, merely chipped at the dragon's impenetrable hide. Our finest archers, whose arrows could pierce a coin at 100 paces, found their shafts breaking against its armored scales. We had lost countless soldiers, swallowed by the waves or crushed beneath the monster's immense bulk. Desperation had led us to consult reclusive mystics and ancient texts, seeking any remedy, any weakness. They spoke of wards, of ancient rituals, of offerings to the sea, but nothing worked. The dragon returned always with renewed fury. I remember one afternoon, after a particularly brutal attack that had destroyed half of our fishing fleet. I walked through the makeshift infirmary, the air thick with the smell of herbs and suffering. A young boy, no older than 10, lay on a cot, his face pale, his arm mangled. He had been on one of the junks, fishing with his father. His father was gone. The boy looked up at me, his eyes wide with a silent plea that pierced me deeper than any sword. "Prince Kang," he whispered, "will it come again?" I knelt beside him, trying to project a strength I didn't feel. "We will protect you, little one," I promised, my voice rough. But even as I spoke the words, a chill ran down my spine. Could I? That night I confronted my father again, the memory of the boy's eyes burning in my mind. "We cannot continue like this, father," I urged, pacing the imperial chambers. The air was heavy with the scent of aged scrolls and my own frustration. We are sending our men to their deaths, our people are losing hope. We must do something different. My father sighed, rubbing his temples. What more can we do, Kang? We have exhausted every avenue. Our navy is crippled, our treasury depleted by the rebuilding efforts. The scholars say it is an act of the heavens, a punishment. A punishment for what? I shot back, my voice rising. Our people are righteous. They toil, they pray, they do not deserve this. I clenched my fists. There must be another way. A legend, a forgotten spell, a hidden truth, something. He looked at me, his eyes filled with a deep sorrow. There are whispers, Kang, tales spoken by the oldest among us, those who remember a time before our fathers. They speak of a realm beyond our sight, of spirits and ancient guardians. Guardians, I pressed, a flicker of hope igniting within me. What kind of guardians? Of the sea itself, he murmured almost to himself. Long ago, before the first emperor, it is said that the sea had its own protectors, beings of immense power tied to the very currents and tides. But these are just stories, Kang. Faded echoes of a bygone era. But what if they are more than stories? I countered, my mind racing. What if this dragon is not merely a beast but something else? A guardian corrupted or angered? I remembered the way it moved, with an intelligence that seemed to mock our efforts, a terrifying grace that felt almost deliberate. If it is a guardian, then perhaps it can be appeased, not fought. My father paused, considering my words. He had always encouraged me to think beyond conventional wisdom, to seek truth in unexpected places. There is one, he finally said, his voice barely above a whisper. One who is said to possess knowledge of such things, an old sorcerer, Master Li. He lives in solitude deep in the bamboo mountains, far from the reach of civilization. Many call him a hermit, some a madman, but it is said he can speak with the spirits and read the threads of fate. Then I will go to him, I declared, my resolve hardening. I will seek out Master Li. If anyone can tell us why this monster attacks, it is he. My father frowned. It is a dangerous journey, my son. The mountains are treacherous, filled with wild beasts and forgotten paths, and Master Li is not known for his hospitality. He shuns the affairs of men. I will go, I repeated, my voice firm. I cannot sit idly by while our kingdom crumbles. If there is even a sliver of hope, I must pursue it. He looked at me, a flicker of pride in his weary eyes. Then you shall have my blessing, and the finest guards the kingdom can spare. But choose wisely, Kang. This is a quest where strength of arm may be less valuable than strength of spirit. I spent the rest of the night organizing. I knew I couldn't take a large retinue. Speed and discretion would be paramount. I needed someone who knew the mountains, someone resourceful, and above all, someone I could trust with my life. My thoughts immediately turned to May. May was not like the other warriors in the Imperial Guard. She was smaller, quicker, her movements as fluid as a river current. She wielded a dao blade with a deadly grace, but it was her mind that truly set her apart. She was sharp, observant, her eyes missing nothing. She had grown up on the fringes of the kingdom, her family hunters and trackers, their knowledge of the wild lands surpassed by few. I had often sparred with her, and she had bested me more times than I cared to admit, always with a respectful bow and a knowing glint in her eyes. She saw things others missed. She understood the language of the forest and the whispers of the wind. I found her in the courtyard, practicing her forms under the pale moonlight, her silhouette a dance of steel and shadow. She moved with an effortless efficiency, her blade whistling through the air. May, I called out, her name echoing softly in the quiet night. She stopped mid-movement, her blade still, her eyes turning to me, keen and alert. My prince, she said, bowing low, is something amiss? Something is amiss, yes, I replied, stepping closer. Our kingdom is dying. I am going to the bamboo mountains to seek out Master Li. I need your guidance, I need your skills. Will you come with me? She looked at me, her expression unreadable for a moment. Then a slow, determined nod. It would be an honor, my prince, I will prepare immediately. No questions, no hesitation. Just that unwavering loyalty and quiet strength. It was exactly what I needed. Together, we would embark on a journey into the unknown, leaving behind the ravaged shores of Tianhai and the terrifying wrath of the sea dragon. I knew deep in my heart that this was our last hope. The fate of our kingdom, perhaps even the fate of our very understanding of the world, rested on our shoulders. The morning we departed was shrouded in a mist as thick and heavy as the despair that clung to our kingdom. We left before dawn, May and I, accompanied only by 2 pack mules laden with supplies for the arduous trek ahead. My father had wanted a larger escort, but I insisted on a small party. A larger group would be slower, more conspicuous, and I felt that our mission required a certain humility, a quiet approach to a problem that had defied all our grand military might. As we rode out through the silent city gates, the guards bowed low, their faces etched with weary hope. I felt the weight of their silent prayers, a burden both heavy and inspiring. The first few days were a blur of travel across the fertile plains that stretched inland from Tianhai. The land here was still vibrant, untouched by the sea dragon's direct wrath, but the distant cries of gulls and the faint salty tang in the air were constant reminders of the devastation we left behind. May, true to her reputation, was an expert guide. She moved with an innate understanding of the land, her senses acutely tuned to every rustle in the undergrowth, every shift in the wind. I, accustomed to the paved courtyards and manicured gardens of the palace, found myself constantly amazed by her effortless grace in the wild. She pointed out tracks I would have missed, identified edible plants from poisonous ones, and could discern the approaching weather by the subtle changes in the sky. "The air carries a scent of coming rain, my prince," she would say, pointing to a distant cloud formation that to my eyes seemed innocuous. Hours later, the heavens would open, drenching us, but always May would have found a sheltered overhang or quickly erected a sturdy lean-to, seemingly from nothing. Our conversations were sparse at first, mostly practical matters of navigation and survival. I was the prince, accustomed to giving orders, but here, in the vastness of the wilderness, May was clearly in command. She made decisions about our route, our pace, where we would make camp. I found myself deferring to her judgment without a second thought, a humbling yet strangely liberating experience. The hierarchy of the palace dissolved under the open sky. We were just 2 individuals, bound by a shared purpose. One evening, as we sat by a small, carefully doused fire, eating a meager supper of dried meat and rice, I found myself asking her about her life. "You grew up knowing these lands, May," I began, gesturing to the silent forest around us. "Was it always your path to become a warrior?" She looked into the embers, her expression thoughtful. "My family hunted to survive, my prince. The forest was our larder, our protector, and our constant teacher. We learned to be swift, to be silent, to observe. To fight was simply another skill, like tracking or knot tying. When the Imperial Guard sought new recruits from the borderlands, I saw an opportunity to serve the kingdom, and perhaps to see more of the world beyond these trees." "And you have seen much," I mused, remembering her tales of skirmishes with mountain bandits and scouting missions into disputed territories. "You are wasted guarding palace gates, May." She gave a small, almost imperceptible smile. "The Emperor's palace requires vigilance, my prince, but I confess the open road calls to me more often." I felt a kinship with her in that moment, a shared desire for something beyond the confines of our roles. We were both seeking answers, albeit for different reasons, in the wilds that stretched before us. As we delved deeper into the bamboo mountains, the terrain grew more challenging. The gentle slopes gave way to steep, rocky ascents and dizzying descents into shadowed ravines. The air grew thinner, cooler, and the ubiquitous bamboo forests began to dominate the landscape, their tall, swaying stalks creating a whispering, emerald labyrinth. The silence here was profound, broken only by the chirping of unseen insects, the distant cry of a hawk, or the rustle of our own passage. It was a silence that felt ancient, pregnant with forgotten secrets. May warned me about the mountain spirits, tales her grandmother used to tell. "They say the spirits of the mountains guard these paths, my prince," she whispered one night, as we huddled in a small cave, a fierce wind howling outside. "They do not like intruders. One must show respect or risk their wrath." I, a prince raised on Confucian texts and military strategy, had always dismissed such talk as folk superstition. But here in the heart of these ancient mountains, surrounded by the unknown, I found myself listening with a new openness. The very air felt different, charged with an unseen energy. One afternoon, as we traversed a narrow, winding path along a sheer cliff face, a sudden tremor shook the ground. Loose rocks cascaded down the slope above us, narrowly missing May. Before I could react, she had already leaped forward, pulling one of the mules, whose foot had slipped, back from the edge with surprising strength. The other mule, spooked, nearly bolted, but I managed to grab its bridle, steadying it with a firm hand. "Are you all right, May?" I asked, my heart pounding. She nodded, brushing dust from her tunic. "A minor rockfall, my prince. The mountains are alive and sometimes they shift. We must be ever vigilant." Her calm under pressure was astounding. I realized then that my own life and the success of our mission depended entirely on her keen instincts and unwavering composure. Days bled into weeks. The journey was a constant test of endurance, both physical and mental. My muscles ached, my clothes were torn, and my regal bearing had long since been replaced by the weary gait of a traveller. Yet with each passing day, I felt a subtle change within myself. The frustrations and anxieties of the palace seemed distant, replaced by a sharpened focus, a deeper connection to the earth beneath my feet. I learned to read May's subtle cues, to anticipate her silent commands, and to move through the wilderness with a newfound, if rudimentary, fluidity. We began to see signs of human presence, albeit unusual ones. Small cairns of stones balanced precariously, marking forgotten paths. Strange symbols carved into ancient trees, long since overgrown with moss. These were not the signs of common travellers, but rather the deliberate marks of someone who understood the deeper, wilder rhythms of the mountains. "Master Lee's territory," May stated one morning, pointing to a particularly intricate carving on a gnarled pine. It depicted a swirling vortex with a single eye at its centre. My grandmother spoke of such markings. They are wards meant to deter the uninvited or to guide those who know their meaning. I studied the carving, a prickle of anticipation running down my spine. We were close. The air grew colder still, and a thin mist, not unlike the one that had greeted our departure, began to cling to the bamboo stalks. The sounds of the forest seemed to recede, replaced by an eerie quiet. Then we came upon the waterfall. It wasn't marked on any map, a hidden grotto carved into the side of the mountain, where a torrent of water plunged from a dizzying height into a crystal-clear pool below. The spray filled the air, creating a constant, shimmering rainbow, but it was not the beauty that caught my attention. It was the presence. An undeniable sense of power, ancient and profound, emanated from the grotto. "This is it, my prince," May whispered, her voice hushed with reverence. "This is where the legends say Master Lee resides." Before us, partially obscured by the cascading water and thick vines, was a small, ramshackle dwelling, built into the very rock face. It looked as if it had grown from the mountain itself, a collection of weathered timbers and moss-covered stones. A thin wisp of smoke curled lazily from a crude chimney. We dismounted, the mule's hooves silent on the damp earth. My heart hammered in my chest. After weeks of arduous travel, of facing the dangers of the wild, we were finally here. The man who might hold the key to our kingdom's salvation, or perhaps its final doom, was just beyond that curtain of water. As we approached, a figure emerged from the shadows of the dwelling. He was an old man, impossibly old, his frame stooped, his long white hair and beard flowing almost to his waist. His clothes were simple homespun, but his eyes were like chips of polished jade, ancient and piercing, seeming to see not just us, but through us into the very depths of our souls. He carried a gnarled staff that looked more like a twisted branch than a crafted tool. He surveyed us, his gaze lingering on my travel-worn attire, then on May's alert stance, and finally on my face. A slow, knowing smile spread across his wrinkled lips, revealing teeth stained yellow with age. "You have come a long way, young prince." Master Lee's voice was surprisingly strong, a gravelly rumble that seemed to echo in the grotto. "And you, brave warrior, the mountains have tested you and you have persevered. But the true test, I fear, is yet to begin." My breath hitched. He knew who I was and he knew why we had come without a single word from us. He raised his staff, tapping it once on the wet ground. The sound was surprisingly loud, resonating through the grotto. "The dragon," he stated, his jade eyes fixing on mine. "It is not merely a beast, is it? You sense the truth, young Kang. A truth that your kingdom has forgotten or perhaps deliberately ignored. My mind reeled. This was it. The confirmation I had sought, the validation of my desperate hope. I took a step forward, ready to pour out all my questions, all my fears, all the suffering of my people. But Master Li simply turned, his gaze sweeping over the waterfall and then back to us. "Come," he said, his voice softer now, almost an invitation. "The tea is warm, and the spirits of the mountain whisper tales that must be heard, tales of the sea and of its ancient wrath." We followed him, May and I, into the small, dim dwelling. The air inside was thick with the scent of herbs, old parchment, and something else, something indefinable, ancient and mystical. Scrolls were piled high in corners, strange artifacts hung from the ceiling, and a small, flickering fire cast dancing shadows on the walls. It was clear this was no ordinary home, and Master Li no ordinary man. My hope, fragile yet persistent, surged into a powerful current. We had found him. Now we had to listen, we had to understand. For the sake of Tianhai, we had to. "Are you all right, May?" I asked, my heart pounding. She nodded, brushing dust from her tunic. "A minor rockfall, my prince. The mountains are alive and sometimes they shift. We must be ever vigilant." Her calm under pressure was astounding. I realized then that my own life and the success of our mission depended entirely on her keen instincts and unwavering composure. Days bled into weeks. The journey was a constant test of endurance, both physical and mental. My muscles ached, my clothes were torn, and my regal bearing had long since been replaced by the weary gait of a traveller. Yet with each passing day, I felt a subtle change within myself. The frustrations and anxieties of the palace seemed distant, replaced by a sharpened focus, a deeper connection to the earth beneath my feet. I learned to read May's subtle cues, to anticipate her silent commands, and to move through the wilderness with a newfound, if rudimentary, fluidity. I learned to tie a proper knot that wouldn't fray under strain, to distinguish between edible berries and poisonous ones, to listen to the whispers of the wind for signs of impending weather. May taught me to track, to see the faint impressions of paws and hooves on the forest floor, to understand the language of snapped twigs and disturbed leaves. I had always assumed such skills were for commoners, for hunters and peasants, not for a prince destined to rule. But out here, separated from the comforting illusion of my station, they were the very currency of survival. My hands, once soft, grew calloused. My face, once smooth, was now weathered by sun and wind. I still missed the comforts of the palace, the silk robes, the warm baths, the endless supply of roasted duck. But I found a strange satisfaction in this new, harder existence. It was as if the mountains themselves were stripping away my old self, layer by painful layer, revealing something truer, something more resilient beneath. May, in contrast, seemed to thrive. She moved with an effortless grace, her steps light and sure-footed, even when we scrambled over treacherous scree or navigated dense thickets. Her eyes missed nothing, a distant hawk, the rustle of a hidden creature, the subtle shift in the light that foretold a coming storm. She truly was a daughter of the wilds, and I, a pampered city boy, was humbled by her strength and wisdom. We spoke less as the journey progressed, our communication becoming a silent symphony of gestures and knowing glances. A raised eyebrow from her, a slight nod from me, and the mules would be steered in the desired direction. Camp would be set or a detour taken around a potential hazard. It was an education far more profound than any I had received in the royal academies. The air grew progressively thinner, the nights colder, the terrain more rugged. We ascended higher into the mountains, leaving the familiar bamboo forests behind for landscapes of jagged peaks and ancient, gnarled pines. The rivers here ran faster, carving deep gorges, their waters a frigid glacial blue. We saw fewer animals, but those we did encounter were different. Mountain cats with piercing eyes, eagles circling impossibly high above, their calls echoing through the vast emptiness. The sheer scale of it all was overwhelming, reminding me of the insignificance of human endeavors against the backdrop of nature's grandeur. My quest, the suffering of my people, the dragon's wrath, it all felt like a tiny ripple in an ocean of ancient, cosmic forces. Yet this humbling also instilled a new kind of resolve. If I was but a small part of this vastness, then my actions, however small, might still be enough to tip the balance. We began to see signs of human presence, albeit unusual ones. Small cairns of stones balanced precariously, marking forgotten paths. Strange symbols carved into ancient trees, long since overgrown with moss. These were not the signs of common travellers, but rather the deliberate marks of someone who understood the deeper, wilder rhythms of the mountains. They spoke of a presence that was both watchful and deeply connected to the land. I felt as though we were being observed, not by a hostile force, but by a silent, unseen guardian weighing our intentions. "Master Lee's territory," May stated one morning, pointing to a particularly intricate carving on a gnarled pine. It depicted a swirling vortex with a single eye at its center. My grandmother spoke of such markings. They are wards meant to deter the uninvited or to guide those who know their meaning. "We are on the right path, my prince." I studied the carving, a prickle of anticipation running down my spine. We were close. The air grew colder still, and a thin mist, not unlike the one that had greeted our departure from Tianhai, began to cling to the bamboo stalks, which here grew sparse and hardy. The sounds of the forest seemed to recede, replaced by an eerie quiet, broken only by the rush of distant water and the whisper of the wind through the peaks. It was a silence that felt heavy with ancient secrets, a hush that seemed to hold its breath in expectation. My own breath hitched in my chest. The very atmosphere hummed with an almost palpable energy, a sense of approaching something truly profound. Then we came upon the waterfall. It wasn't marked on any map, a hidden grotto carved into the side of the mountain, where a torrent of water plunged from a dizzying height into a crystal-clear pool below. The spray filled the air, creating a constant, shimmering rainbow that danced in the sunlight, lending the entire scene an ethereal, almost dreamlike quality. But it was not the beauty that caught my attention. It was the presence. An undeniable sense of power, ancient and profound, emanated from the grotto. It felt as though the very heart of the mountain beat here, a pulse of raw, untamed magic. The air tasted of ozone and damp earth, clean and invigorating. "This is it, my prince," May whispered, her voice hushed with reverence, her hand resting instinctively on the hilt of her sword. Even her seasoned warrior's composure seemed momentarily shaken by the sheer majesty, and perhaps the underlying power of the place. "This is where the legends say Master Lee resides, the Grotto of Whispering Waters." Before us, partially obscured by the cascading water and thick vines, was a small, ramshackle dwelling built into the very rock face. It looked as if it had grown from the mountain itself, a collection of weathered timbers and moss-covered stones, perfectly camouflaged against the rugged grey rock. A thin wisp of smoke curled lazily from a crude chimney, its plume barely visible against the misty backdrop, a solitary sign of life in this wild, untamed sanctuary. The dwelling seemed to breathe with the mountain, a part of its very being. We dismounted, the mules' hooves silent on the damp earth, their usual complaints replaced by a quiet submission to the sacred aura of the place. My heart hammered in my chest, a frantic drum against my ribs. After weeks of arduous travel, of facing the dangers of the wild, of confronting my own weaknesses and growing strengths, we were finally here. The man who might hold the key to our kingdom's salvation, or perhaps its final doom, was just beyond that shimmering curtain of water. My palms felt suddenly slick with anticipation, my throat dry. Every fibre of my being was concentrated on this moment. As we approached, a figure emerged from the shadows of the dwelling. He was an old man, impossibly old, his frame stooped, his long white hair and beard flowing almost to his waist, like ancient waterfalls themselves. His clothes were simple, homespun, made of coarse hemp and wool. But his eyes were like chips of polished jade, ancient and piercing, seeming to see not just us, but through us into the very depths of our souls, into the secrets we carried and the truths we sought. He carried a gnarled staff that looked more like a twisted branch torn from an ancient tree than a crafted tool, its surface smooth from countless years of handling. He surveyed us, his gaze lingering on my travel-worn attire, then on May's alert stance, and finally on my face. There was no surprise in his expression, only a profound, almost weary understanding. A slow, knowing smile spread across his wrinkled lips, revealing teeth stained yellow with age like old ivory. "You have come a long way, young prince." Master Li's voice was surprisingly strong, a gravelly rumble that seemed to echo in the grotto, resonating with the sound of the falling water. It was a voice that spoke of mountains and centuries, of secrets whispered by the wind. "And you, brave warrior, the mountains have tested you and you have persevered, but the true test, I fear, is yet to begin." My breath hitched. He knew who I was, and he knew why we had come, without a single word from us, without any formal introduction. It was as if he had been expecting us, anticipating our arrival for a long time. This was it. The confirmation I had sought, the validation of my desperate hope. I took a step forward, ready to pour out all my questions, all my fears, all the suffering of my people, to beg for his aid. But Master Li simply raised his staff, tapping it once on the wet ground. The sound was surprisingly loud, resonating through the grotto, a sharp, clear note that cut through the roar of the waterfall. He turned, his gaze sweeping over the cascading water, and then back to us, his jade eyes fixing on mine once more. "The dragon," he stated, his voice now lower, more solemn. "It is not merely a beast, is it? You sense the truth, young Kang, a truth that your kingdom has forgotten or perhaps deliberately ignored, a truth that has been waiting patiently, like the mountain itself, for someone to finally listen." My mind reeled. He spoke of the dragon not as a monster, but as something more. He confirmed my intuition, the flicker of doubt that had grown into a burning conviction. He spoke of forgotten truths. What could they be? What had my ancestors, or the rulers before me, done to incur such a wrath, or to forget such a vital knowledge? All the fear and anxiety that had driven me here now coalesced into a desperate hunger for understanding. "Come," he said, his voice softer now, almost an invitation, a gentle beckoning. "The tea is warm, and the spirits of the mountain whisper tales that must be heard, tales of the sea and of its ancient wrath, tales that will reveal the true nature of the creature you call a monster, and the profound imbalance your people have wrought." We followed him, May and I, into the small, dim dwelling. The air inside was thick with the scent of herbs, old parchment, and something else, something indefinable, ancient and mystical, like the very essence of the earth and the passage of time. Scrolls were piled high in corners, strange artifacts hung from the ceiling, dried herbs, polished stones, small, intricate carvings of animals and symbols I didn't recognize. A small, flickering fire cast dancing shadows on the walls, illuminating murals of mythical creatures and celestial maps. It was clear this was no ordinary home, and Master Li no ordinary man. My hope, fragile yet persistent, surged into a powerful current. We had found him. Now we had to listen, we had to understand. For the sake of Tianhai, we had to. Master Li led us to a low table fashioned from a single massive slab of polished river stone. Around it, cushions woven from reeds and dried grasses were arranged. He gestured for us to sit, his eyes twinkling in the firelight. The air, though thick with the scent of age and magic, felt strangely comforting, a stark contrast to the wild, untamed nature outside. A steaming pot sat on a small brazier, its aroma herbal and earthy, promising warmth. "You seek answers, young prince," Master Li began, pouring a dark, fragrant liquid into 3 simple clay cups. He handed one to May, whose expression was a mixture of awe and warrior's vigilance, always ready for the unexpected. He offered the second to me, his gaze steady, penetrating. "And answers you shall have. But understand, the truth is rarely simple, and often it is bitter. Will you drink of it even if it burns?" I nodded, my voice caught in my throat. I took the cup, the warmth seeping into my cold hands, a small comfort against the enormity of what was to come. May, ever practical, sniffed her tea cautiously before taking a sip, her brow furrowing slightly. I, however, drank deeply, the rich, earthy taste coating my tongue, a strange mix of roots and mountain herbs awakening my senses. Master Li settled himself cross-legged, his ancient eyes fixed on the flickering flames. "Long ago," he began, his voice a low, resonant hum, "before your ancestors carved their first settlements into the coastal cliffs, before they dreamt of kingdoms and crowns, the land of Tianhai was different. It was wilder, yes, but also in balance. The people then knew their place. They understood that the sea, giver of life, was also a force to be respected, feared, and honored. And they knew of its guardian. He paused, letting his words hang in the air, allowing the weight of history to settle upon us. The creature you call the sea dragon, the terror of your shores, is no mere beast. It is Ao Shun, the azure serpent, a spirit older than the mountains themselves, a living embodiment of the ocean's power. For countless generations, Ao Shun has watched over these waters, ensuring their bounty, protecting the fragile harmony between land and sea. My heart pounded. Ao Shun. The name itself resonated with ancient power, a name whispered in hushed tones in forgotten lullabies, a name I had last heard from my own grandmother, long since passed, who spoke of old tales with a reverence my father had dismissed as mere superstition. It was real, all of it. Our ancestors, Master Li continued, his voice laced with a subtle sorrow, understood this. They knew that the sea gave them fish, pearls, safe passage for their small fishing boats, but it demanded respect in return. A pact was forged, a bond of mutual understanding. The people would take only what they needed, never more. They would offer thanks and tribute at the sacred coastal shrines. They would never pollute the waters, nor disturb the deep places where Ao Shun rested. And in return, Ao Shun ensured calm seas, abundant harvests, and protection from distant threats. What happened? I finally managed to ask, my voice hoarse. The tea had warmed me, but a chill had settled deep in my bones as the enormity of our transgressions began to dawn on me. Why did the pact break? Master Li sighed, a sound like dry leaves rustling in a forgotten wind. Ambition, young prince, greed, the same plagues that often consume mortal hearts. As your kingdom grew, so did its hunger. The small fishing villages became bustling ports. The modest fishing boats became large fleets, venturing further and deeper. The demand for resources grew insatiable. More fish, more pearls, more exotic shells to adorn the wealthy. The ancient warnings, the whispers of Ao Shun's watchful presence, faded into legend, then into myth, and finally into forgotten tales. He looked directly at me, his jade eyes piercing. Your people began to take without limit, without thought, without reverence. They fished out entire schools, leaving barren stretches of ocean. They cast their waste into the waves, turning once pristine coves into cesspools. They dredged the seabed for rare minerals, destroying the very nurseries of life. They built grand temples to their own gods, neglecting the ancient shrines that honored the sea and its guardian. They broke the pact, not in a single defiant act, but slowly, incrementally, layer by layer, until the very foundation of trust was eroded. Shame washed over me, a bitter wave. I thought of the sprawling markets of Tianhai, overflowing with the spoils of the ocean, of the grand banquets where exotic sea creatures were served as delicacies, of the gleaming harbours choked with ships, their nets casting shadows over the once vibrant reefs. My own hands, I realised, were not clean. I had partaken of this bounty, oblivious to the cost. My father, my grandfather, all the rulers before me had presided over this slow, devastating betrayal. The attacks, May interjected, her grip tight on her teacup, her warrior's mind seeking patterns, understanding. They started recently, didn't they? In the last few years. Not centuries ago when the pact was first broken. Indeed, brave warrior, Master Li affirmed. Ao Shun is patient. Like the ocean itself, its anger builds slowly, imperceptibly, until it can no longer be contained. For decades, the Guardian observed, warned with subtle signs, smaller catches, localized storms, strange currents. But your people did not heed. They merely devised new ways to plunder, new technologies to overcome these natural obstacles. The silence of your kingdom was deafening. The disrespect profound. The recent attacks, he continued, his voice gaining a somber intensity, are not random acts of vengeance. They are a desperate cry, a final warning. Ao Shun is not trying to destroy your kingdom. It is trying to force you to listen, to remember. It is protecting itself, and in doing so, protecting the very lifeblood of the sea, which your people are so recklessly destroying. It is a guardian, yes, but a guardian pushed to its limits, forced to become a wrathful defender. My despair threatened to overwhelm me. How could we ever atone for generations of such profound disrespect? The task seemed insurmountable. The burden of my ancestors' mistakes now laid bare before me felt heavier than any crown. "So, what can we do?" I asked, my voice barely a whisper, filled with a desperate plea. "Is there a way to make amends, to appease our shun?" Master Li's gaze softened slightly, a flicker of ancient hope in his eyes. "There is always a way, young prince, so long as there is sincerity in the heart, but the path will be difficult. It will demand more than mere words or token offerings. It will demand sacrifice, humility, and a true understanding of what it means to live in harmony with the natural world." He leaned forward, his voice dropping to a conspiratorial whisper, as if sharing a sacred secret. "You must re-establish the pact, not with words on parchment but with deeds. You must demonstrate to Ao Shun that your kingdom has remembered, that it has learned. The first step is to acknowledge the truth before your people, to confess the errors of the past. This will not be easy, for pride is a powerful shield." I imagined standing before my court, before the merchants and officials, before my own father if he were still alive, and admitting that our prosperity was built on sacrilege, on the desecration of a sacred trust. The thought sent a cold shiver down my spine. It would invite scorn, ridicule, perhaps even rebellion. But Master Li's words carried an undeniable truth. How could we ask for forgiveness if we could not even admit our wrongdoings? "Beyond that," Master Li continued, "you must undertake a pilgrimage to the 3 ancient shrines dedicated to Ao Shun, scattered along the coast. Each shrine represents a different aspect of the sea's power, the bounty, the depth, and the tempest. At each you must perform a ritual of cleansing and renewal, offering a specific tribute. These are not grand, showy offerings of gold or jewels. They are offerings of humility, of effort, of a pure heart." He picked up a small, smooth stone from the table, turning it over in his gnarled fingers. "The first shrine at the Whispering Sands requires an offering of purification. You must gather a vessel of the purest freshwater from the highest mountain spring, the very source of our rivers, and pour it into the sea at dawn, symbolizing the cleansing of all the impurities your people have cast into its depths. This journey to the spring alone is arduous, leading to peaks rarely trod by man." May exchanged a glance with me, her eyes reflecting the challenge inherent in such a task. She had trained in the mountains, she knew the dangers. But her jaw was set, a silent promise of her unwavering support. "The second shrine," Master Li went on, "is hidden deep within the sunken caves beneath the treacherous Serpent's Tooth cliffs. There you must retrieve a single, luminous pearl, not from its depths, but from the maw of the greatest, most ancient oyster. This pearl is not for human adornment. It is a symbol of the sea's hidden treasures, and you must return it to a living reef, a gesture of giving back what was taken, of nurturing new life. The caves are guarded by treacherous currents and creatures of the deep, a trial of courage and patience." My mind immediately pictured the jagged, wave-battered cliffs, known for their dangerous whirlpools and unseen reefs. Tales of ships lost there were common, and a pearl from an ancient oyster that sounded like a formidable challenge in itself, fraught with peril. "And the third and most critical shrine," Master Li's voice grew solemn, "is located on the Isle of the Sleeping Giants, an island shrouded in perpetual mist, rarely seen by human eyes. There you must make the ultimate offering, the heart of the mountain. This is not a literal heart, but a sacred crystal, formed over millennia deep within the earth, imbued with the mountain's essence. It must be placed at the heart of the shrine, connecting the power of the land to the power of the sea, restoring the ancient balance. But the Isle of the Sleeping Giants is a place of powerful elemental spirits, and the crystal itself is guarded by trials of wisdom and selflessness." He paused, letting the weight of these tasks sink in. 3 perilous journeys, each demanding a different virtue: purification, humility, courage, wisdom, and selflessness. It was not a quest for a warrior, but for a true leader, a true guardian of his people and his world. "These journeys," I said, my voice stronger now, filled with a growing resolve despite the daunting nature of the tasks. "They sound impossible." "Nothing is impossible for a heart dedicated to truth and redemption, young prince," Master Li countered gently. "But time, alas, is not on your side. Ao Shun's patience is at an end. The attacks will escalate. The very fabric of your kingdom will unravel if the balance is not restored swiftly. The wrath of the sea, once fully unleashed, cannot be contained by mortal hands. He looked towards the small, arched window of his dwelling, where the mist from the waterfall swirled. I can guide you with knowledge, young prince. I can share the ancient lore, show you the maps to these forgotten places. But the journey itself, the trials, the sacrifices, these you must undertake yourself, with the aid of those who stand with you. Your brave warrior here will be invaluable, but ultimately the destiny of Tianhai rests upon your shoulders, upon your willingness to mend what has been broken. My gaze met May's. Her eyes, usually so fierce and unyielding, now held a deep, quiet understanding and an unwavering commitment. She knew the dangers, yet there was no hesitation, only a silent promise to stand by me, to face whatever lay ahead. My fear had not vanished, but it was now overshadowed by a powerful sense of purpose. The path ahead was clear, though fraught with peril. We had come seeking answers, and Master Li had given them, along with a monumental task. The fate of Tianhai hung in the balance, a delicate thread between our past mistakes and a future we now had the chance to forge anew. We had to move, and quickly. Master Li slowly rose, his movements deliberate. Rest now. Tomorrow we will begin the preparations. I will provide you with what you need for the journey to the Whispering Sands. The path is long, and the mountain spring flows from the very roof of the world. He turned, his silhouette framed against the soft glow of the fire. Remember this, Prince Kang. The strength of a kingdom is not measured by its armies or its riches, but by its harmony with the world around it. You must become the bridge between your people and the ancient guardian. You must become the voice that speaks for both. I felt a profound shift within me. The weight of the crown, once a symbol of inherited power, now felt like a sacred duty, a calling to stewardship. I was no longer merely a prince, but a seeker of balance, a potential restorer of peace. The journey had truly begun, not just geographically, but spiritually. The sea dragon's wrath was a mirror reflecting the kingdom's own soul. And it was time to look into that mirror, to confront the uncomfortable truths, and to begin the long, arduous process of healing. We spent the rest of the evening in quiet contemplation, absorbing the weight of Master Li's revelations. He shared further details of the ancient pact, stories of forgotten ceremonies, and the subtle ways the sea had once communicated with the people of Tianhai. He spoke of rare herbs that could ward off certain dangers, of the specific phases of the moon that would be most auspicious for each ritual. May meticulously drew maps based on his descriptions, her sharp memory capturing every detail of currents, mountain passes, and hidden landmarks. My mind, however, was still reeling from the sheer magnitude of our undertaking. The sea dragon, our Shun, was not just a beast to be defeated, but an ancient spirit to be understood, respected, and appeased. It was a complete paradigm shift, demanding not military might but spiritual fortitude. As the hours passed, the waterfall outside seemed to soften its roar, becoming a lullaby, a constant, comforting presence. But even through the tranquility, the urgency of our quest pressed in. Every moment wasted meant more suffering for Tianhai, more destruction wrought by a guardian pushed to its breaking point. We had found Master Li, and he had given us the path. Now we had to walk it, no matter how treacherous. The first rays of dawn brought not just light, but a sharpened sense of purpose. Master Li, true to his word, had laid out maps etched on ancient vellum, showing currents and forgotten paths. He provided us with a small, intricately carved jade amulet, said to ward off ill will, and dried rations for the arduous journey. May packed our supplies with practiced efficiency, her movements crisp and decisive. I too felt a new resolve solidify within me. The fear was still a cold knot in my stomach, but it was now overshadowed by a burning desire to set things right, to protect my people. Our journey to the Whispering Sands was a test of endurance. We trekked through dense forests where ancient trees seemed to watch us with silent judgment, across rocky plains baked by the sun, and over foothills that offered glimpses of the distant, churning sea, a constant reminder of the wrath we sought to quell. Each night we spoke little, conserving our energy, our minds focused on the monumental tasks ahead. Master Li's words echoed in my mind. The strength of a kingdom is not measured by its armies or its riches, but by its harmony with the world around it. It was a lesson I was learning with every painful step. When we finally reached the Whispering Sands, the name proved apt. The dunes stretched endlessly, their surface a shimmering expanse of fine, almost iridescent grains that seemed to hum with a low, ethereal sound in the wind. The air was dry, yet carried a strange, salty tang. At the heart of this desolate beauty, Master Li had indicated, lay the first shrine, a natural amphitheatre of smooth, wind-sculpted rock. Inside, a pool of water, surprisingly clear, shimmered under the open sky. "This is it, Prince Kang," May said, her voice hushed. "The place of purification." My task was to cleanse myself, to shed the burdens of my predecessors' hubris and my own ignorance. I stripped away my clothes, feeling the cool desert air on my skin, and stepped into the pool. The water was shockingly cold, 1,000 needles pricking my flesh, but as I submerged myself, a profound sense of clarity washed over me. I thought of the countless grains of sand we had collected from the desecrated beaches of Tianhai, now stored in the woven pouches Master Li had given us. With each handful I poured into the pristine pool, I offered a silent apology, a vow to respect the boundaries between land and sea, between human ambition and nature's ancient rights. The sand dissolved, not into murky silt but into the water itself, leaving no trace, as if the sea itself was accepting our offering, absorbing our repentance. It was a simple act, yet deeply symbolic, a cleansing not just of the body but of the spirit. We spent a full day there, ensuring every grain was returned, every intention pure. With the first shrine appeased, a lightness settled upon us. But as we journeyed towards the Serpent's Tooth Cliffs, a new urgency gripped Tianhai. Messages carried by frantic couriers reached us. The sea attacks were escalating. Fishing vessels were being smashed against the shore, coastal villages submerged by rogue waves, and the very air thrummed with the sea dragon's fury. Our Shun was growing impatient. We pressed on, driven by the desperation of our people, the image of their suffering a constant goad. The Serpent's Tooth Cliffs were even more formidable than I had imagined. Jagged black rock jutted from the tumultuous sea like decaying fangs, perpetually shrouded in a fine, stinging spray. The air roared with the clash of waves against stone, and treacherous whirlpools swirled ominously below. Master Li had warned us of the swift currents that could drag even the strongest swimmer to their doom. We found the entrance to the sunken caves only by following his precise instructions, a narrow, almost invisible fissure at the base of the central cliff, accessible only at low tide. "Stay close, Prince," May commanded, her voice barely audible above the din. "The currents here are unforgiving." We plunged into the cold, dark water, pulling ourselves along a submerged ledge, guided by the faint glow of a bioluminescent moss Master Li had told us to look for. The caves were a labyrinth of twisting tunnels, some barely wide enough for us to squeeze through, others opening into vast, echoing chambers where unseen depths stretched below. Strange, luminescent creatures darted past us, their eyes like scattered jewels in the gloom. The air grew heavy, thick with the scent of salt and ancient stone. Finally, after what felt like an eternity, we reached the heart of the caves. Before us, nestled in a vast, underwater grotto, lay a colossal oyster, easily the size of a small house. Its shell was encrusted with centuries of growth, barnacles and corals creating a miniature ecosystem on its surface. This was the ancient one, the guardian of the luminous pearl. May, ever the pragmatist, immediately assessed the situation. "It's too large to force open, Prince. We must wait for it to open naturally." We positioned ourselves, holding our breath, the pressure in our ears a constant ache. The water was cold, bone-chilling. Minutes stretched into hours. My lungs burned, my muscles cramped, but I knew we couldn't fail. Master Li's words about patience resonated. This was a trial of humility, of understanding that some things cannot be rushed or forced. And then, with a slow, deliberate groan that vibrated through the water, the colossal shell began to part. Inside, bathed in a soft, ethereal light, lay the pearl. It wasn't just luminous, it pulsed with a gentle, inner glow, a living jewel of the sea. Carefully, reverently, I reached in and retrieved it. It was warm to the touch, surprisingly heavy, and radiated a profound sense of peace. Our next task was to return this symbol of the sea's hidden treasures to a living reef, a gesture of giving back what was taken. We swam out of the caves, the pearl clutched tightly in my hand, and navigated the treacherous currents to a vibrant coral reef Master Li had marked on his map. It teemed with life, a kaleidoscope of colour and movement. With May standing guard, I found a sheltered crevice amidst the coral and gently placed the pearl there. As I withdrew my hand, the pearl's light seemed to intensify, bathing the surrounding reef in a benevolent glow. It was a promise, a silent vow to nurture new life, to respect the delicate balance. As we swam away, I looked back. The reef seemed to shimmer, brighter than before, accepting our offering. The relief of completing the second task was immense, but it was fleeting. News of Ao Shun's escalating wrath reached us again, grimmer than ever. The capital city itself was now under siege, waves crashing over its walls, the docks shattered. The very ground trembled. There was no time to lose. Our final journey to the Isle of the Sleeping Giants was now a race against time. The Isle of the Sleeping Giants was shrouded in perpetual mist, an otherworldly place that seemed to exist outside the normal realm of human perception. Master Li had described it as a nexus of elemental spirits, a place where the earth itself breathed. We chartered a small, sturdy fishing boat, its captain a grizzled old man who spoke of the island in hushed, fearful tones, warning us to never disturb its slumber. The journey was eerily silent, the mist muffling all sounds, creating an atmosphere of profound isolation. As we neared the island, the outlines of immense, stone-like figures began to emerge from the swirling fog, colossal formations that resembled sleeping giants, their faces weathered by millennia, their forms rising steeply from the water. It was a sight that filled me with awe and a sense of my own insignificance. We landed on a small, pebbled beach, the air thick with the scent of damp earth and an ozone-like energy. The path inland was treacherous, winding through ancient, gnarled trees whose branches were laden with moss, their roots snaking across the ground like petrified serpents. The mist swirled around us, playing tricks on our eyes, conjuring fleeting shapes and whispers. This was the trial of wisdom and selflessness, Master Li had said. We had to find the heart of the mountain. Suddenly the mist around us grew dense, swirling into distinct forms. Elemental spirits, just as Master Li had warned. They were not malevolent but watchful, testing. One, a spiraling vortex of wind, blocked our path, its ethereal voice a low moan, asking, "Why do you disturb the slumber of ages?" I stepped forward, my voice clear despite the tremor in my hands. "We come not to disturb but to restore, to mend the broken pact between the land and the sea, to appease the guardian Ao Shun whose wrath now consumes Tianhai." Another spirit, a shimmering figure of water, coalesced before us. Its voice was like the gentle lapping of waves. "What offering do you bring that can bridge the divide?" "The heart of the mountain," I replied, gesturing to the small, leather-bound pouch I carried, containing the sacred crystal Master Li had entrusted to us. A symbol of the earth's essence to be reunited with the sea's power to restore balance. The spirits seemed to contemplate my words, their forms shifting, their whispers echoing around us. It was a test of honesty, of pure intent. May stood silently beside me, her hand resting on the hilt of her sword, but her stance conveyed respect, not aggression. After what felt like an eternity, the spirits slowly receded, their forms dissolving back into the mist, granting us passage. Deeper into the island, we found the shrine. It was a natural cavern, its walls sparkling with veins of quartz and other minerals. At its center, a natural pedestal of polished stone stood, waiting. This was where the heart of the mountain belonged. I carefully removed the crystal from the pouch. It was a magnificent thing, glowing with a deep, earthy red, pulsing with a slow, steady rhythm. As I placed it upon the pedestal, a profound tremor rippled through the island. The ground beneath our feet vibrated, a low hum filling the air. The mist outside the cavern began to swirl with renewed vigor, but this time it felt different, not ominous, but charged with immense energy. The heart of the mountain began to glow brighter, its red light reaching out, connecting with the elemental forces of the island. I felt a surge of ancient power flow through me, a sense of unity with the earth, with the sea. As the crystal pulsed with increasing intensity, the cavern walls began to hum. Outside, the mist parted, revealing the churning sea, no longer enraged but still turbulent, and then a colossal shadow emerged from the depths. Ao Shun, the sea dragon itself. It was even more magnificent and terrifying than the tales described. Its scales shimmered with the colors of the deepest ocean, its eyes glowed with ancient wisdom and a lingering fury. It was immense, a creature of myth made flesh, its breath a mist of sea spray. It rose from the water, towering over our small island, its gaze fixed not on us but on the glowing cavern on the heart of the mountain. This was the climax. This was the ultimate confrontation, not with weapons but with understanding. I stepped out of the cavern, May close behind me, our figures small against the colossal form of the dragon. I raised my hands, not in defiance but in reverence. Great guardian of the sea, Ao Shun, my voice rang out, amplified by the raw power of the island. We, the people of Tianhai, come before you not with fear but with humility. We have erred, we have forgotten the ancient pact, desecrated your domain and taken without giving back. We have come to mend what was broken. I gestured back to the glowing heart of the mountain in the cavern. We have purified ourselves at the whispering sands, returned the sands of our hubris. We have offered back the luminous pearl of your depths, a symbol of our renewed respect for your hidden treasures. And here on the Isle of the Sleeping Giants, we offer the heart of the mountain, to reconnect the land and the sea, to restore the balance we so carelessly disrupted. Ao Shun's great head lowered slightly, its gaze sweeping over me, over May, over the resonating crystal. I felt its ancient intelligence, its hurt, its immense power. For a long moment the world held its breath. The waves crashed against the shore, but the furious roar that had accompanied the dragon's earlier attacks was absent. Only the sound of the sea remained. Then, slowly, majestically, Ao Shun dipped its head towards the cavern, towards the glowing heart. A deep, resonant hum emanated from its colossal body, a sound that vibrated through my very bones, a sound of acknowledgement. It was not a roar of anger, but a sigh of ancient weariness, a profound acceptance. The mist around the island began to dissipate, revealing a sky of clear blue. The churning sea slowly calmed, its waves softening into a gentle rhythm. The light from the heart of the mountain intensified once more, sending out ripples of pure energy that seemed to embrace the dragon, wrapping it in a comforting glow. Ao Shun slowly, gracefully turned. Its immense body slid back into the depths, not with a crash of fury, but with the quiet dignity of a guardian whose vigil had finally been understood. The last thing we saw was its shimmering tail disappearing beneath the now tranquil waves, leaving behind only the vast, calm expanse of the ocean. A profound silence descended upon the island, broken only by the gentle lapping of the waves and the distant cry of a seabird. The air was cleaner, lighter, imbued with a sense of renewed peace. We had done it. We had appeased the sea dragon. May stood beside me, her hand now resting on my shoulder, a look of awe and relief on her face. "You did it, Prince," she whispered, her voice thick with emotion. "You truly did it." I looked out at the tranquil sea, then back at the glowing crystal in the cavern. My journey had begun with fear and uncertainty, a prince burdened by a crown he didn't fully understand. It ended with a profound understanding of stewardship, of the interconnectedness of all things. Tianhai would heal not by conquering its adversaries, but by harmonizing with them. My people would learn, as I had, that true strength lay not in dominance, but in respect, in balance, in the sacred pact between humanity and the ancient world around it. The sea dragon's wrath had taught us a brutal, invaluable lesson, and Tianhai, born anew from the storm, would never forget it. Host voice, and so concludes the epic tale of the sea dragon's wrath. Prince Kang, once a reluctant heir, found his true calling as a guardian of balance, saving his kingdom not through battle, but through understanding and humility. The path was long, filled with peril and profound lessons. But as with all great stories, there are always choices, moments where destiny hangs in the balance. Of all the choices made by Prince Kang, which one led them to this fate? Was it the initial decision to seek out Master Li, rather than confront the dragon head-on? Was it his willingness to listen to ancient law despite his warrior's upbringing? Or perhaps was it the very first act of desecration that set this entire chain of events in motion? Tell me your theories below. Thank you for joining us on this incredible journey. If you enjoyed The Sea Dragon's Wrath, please remember to like this episode, subscribe to our channel for more thrilling audio dramas, and hit that notification bell so you don't miss our next adventure. Next time we plunge into the heart of the forgotten desert, where whispers of a lost civilization echo through the shifting sands. Until then, remember, some legends are not just stories, but lessons waiting to be learned.